Hi there, my name's John Steinbach, Mr. Steinbach or John, either one is fine. And I have a great book here on being a bee. And this was just the book that was given to me, but I was really happy to see it. And you'll see in a little bit that I love bees, and I've got lots of bees in my yard. And the reason I have lots of bees in my yard is because we have lots of plants with flowers that the bees love. And I did that on purpose because bees are so important. We need bees in our world. And they do a lot for us with pollinating things. And the book will talk a little bit about that. But that's how we get our food and the grocery and the beautiful plants around us. Bees do a lot to make all that possible. So this was a great book for me to read. And I'm going to have some pictures that you'll be able to see of my garden and some of the bees in there that you'll see along the way. So this is Being a Bee. And here we go. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It's a sunny summer's day and bees are busy flying from flower to flower. A bee is a kind of an insect. It has 3 pairs of legs and 2 pairs of wings, which move so fast they make a buzzing noise. So when you hear a bee buzz, it's not that they're doing it with a mouth or something, it's because their wings are moving so fast. That's what a buzzing bee is about, is their wings moving so fast. There are thousands of different kinds of bees, but the bees we are going to talk about in this book are honeybees. The honeybee's hairy body is covered in yellow and black stripes, warning other animals not to get too close. Female bees have a stinger at the end of their body and will use it to defend themselves and their family. Watch out, a bee can hurt. So there's some pictures of the bees flying around there. And I'll tell you that as much as I like bees, this summer they got me. And it wasn't a honeybee, it was a different type of bee. And some of them live in the ground, unlike the hives that these guys live in. And I was digging in my garden and I dug up their home. And before I got away from them, I had about 5 or 6 bee stings, and they do hurt. So you got to be careful with bees too. But they won't hurt you unless you do something like dig up their home. Then they get really mad. Meet the family. Honeybees live together in big families called colonies. The colonies is home to the queen bee and as many as 50,000 worker bees. 50,000 worker bees. So when you see an NFL football game and there's a big stadium, if that's all the way filled, it might be 50,000 people. Maybe, probably less. So there's that many bees in a colony, 50,000 worker bees. They build the nests, look after the young bees, and gather nectar and pollen from plants. All of the worker bees are female, so they're all girls. Those are the worker bees. There are also male bees in the colony. They're called drones, and their job is to mate with queen bees from other hives. So we've got the worker bees are all girls, and the drones are the boys, and there's the hive hanging there with some of the bees flying around. And the queen bee. And you might have heard that. Sometimes people will say that somebody is like a queen bee, and it means they're very important. The queen bee, the mother of all the bees in the colony, is the queen bee. She is about twice as big as a worker bee. The queen bee spends most of her life in the nest. Her worker daughters bring her food and groom her. In winter, they huddle around their queen to keep her warm. In summer, they fan their wings to keep her cool. A queen can live between 4 and 7 years, the longest of any bee. The worker bee will survive only 45 days. So the queen lives 4 to 7 years, and the worker bee only 45 days, while a drone can live twice as long, so about 90 days. The queen lays all the eggs for the colony. Sometimes she lays as many as 1,000 eggs in a day. Each one sits in its own little part of the nest called a cell. So that's the queen right there. And there's one queen, and she has all those babies. So it's not like each of these babies have a different mother, but they all come from the queen bee. So they're really different than a human family where we all, just a few of us or one of us comes from one mother. Here it's all from this queen mother. and then inside the nest. Wild honeybees make their nest in trees or between rocks, and many bees also nest in boxes called hives, which people build for them. Wooden frames filled with lots of six-sided wax cells hang down from the top of the hive. There are eggs in some of these cells. Others hold young bees or store food. The bees make the wax from their bodies. A group of wax cells is called a comb. You might have heard of a honeycomb, and sometimes you'll see a bottle of honey and it's got the comb still in it. It's kind of natural honey a lot of times. It'll have the comb in there. So you see them with their little cells there, and you can see the shape of the cells. They're really pretty, and they're all the same shape. And this person is called a beekeeper. And you can see that she's got a little bit of a shield on for the bees, and she'll have gloves on, and this is protective too, so that she won't get stung. But most beekeepers have been around bees enough that the bees aren't going to sting them anyway, but it's just that for their protection that they wear these things, because they're very calm around bees, they know how to handle bees, and they'll pull these out to get the honey, these little slats, and there'll be thousands of bees on them sometimes. New bees. Bees hatch into small, wriggly creatures called larvae. It takes 21 days for larvae to grow into adult bee. At first, the growing bee is fed royal jelly, a rich, sugary food, by the worker bees in the nest. Later, it is fed pollen and honey from the colony's food stores. A growing queen bee gets special treatment. She is fed royal jelly the whole time she is growing up, which helps to prepare her for a life of laying eggs. So the royal jelly is richer than their regular food, and like it says, the queen bee needs lots of that for all the work she's going to do. And it says here that they get pollen and they take it into the hive. And we're going to see more of that a little later, and I've got some pictures from my garden that you'll see along the way of the bees with lots of pollen on their legs, and they collect it there, and it's really fun to see them like that, and it's almost amazing they can fly sometimes. They get so much pollen on there. The first days of a bee. When a young bee is fully grown, she leaves the cell she has been living in. Her first job is to clean it, and other cells too. It's important the cells are clean so they are ready for the next group of larvae or to store food. When she's about 3 days old, the young bee begins to feed the new larva. Then, in the second week of life, her job changes. She starts building and repairing the nest and making new wax cells. So they don't live a very long time, but they've got different jobs at different stages of their short life. Working in the hive. When she is almost 3 weeks old, the bee starts another new job. She waits near the entrance of the hive, ready to take pollen and nectar from other bees flying home who have been collecting it. She also guards the entrance, checking all the returning bees are from her family and not looking to steal honey. Guard bees can tell if bees are from other hives by their smell, and they attack and chase them away. So there's some sneaky bees that try to get in different hives, but there's some guards that watch that. Flying out. When a bee is about 22 days old, she is an adult and ready to gather food. Now, I've got a granddaughter who's about 5 months old. She's not close to being an adult, but at 22 days old, a bee is an adult. She does a few short flights to practice flying and to learn to find her way home. And then she flies out into the open air to search for flowers. And that's where I hope she comes to my yard. The bee flies from plant to plant, collecting nectar and pollen. Flower pollen is like yellow dust, and the bee carries it in parts of her back legs called pollen baskets. Nectar is a sweet liquid made by flowers. When the bee finds it, she sucks it into an extra stomach called a honey sac. Dancing bees. When a worker bee finds a patch of flowers full of nectar and pollen, she tells the other bees how to find it. To do this, she does a dance. You can see the drawings here of how they're dancing around. First, the bee runs around in a circle. Then she cuts across the circle at an angle to show the other bees the direction they should fly in. To tell them how far away the flowers are, she waggles her body. The more she wiggles and waggles, the farther the other bees know they have to go. So that's like words for them, is how they fly in patterns, and the way they wiggle their bodies is the way they communicate to tell the most important thing, which is where is the food at, so they can go get it and bring it back to the hive. Flower to flower. Flowering plants need pollen from a flower of the same kind to help new plants grow. Bees can help flowers get pollen. When a bee lands on a flower, its body gets covered in pollen. And again, there's some pictures of the bees in my yard, and you'll see that. When it visits the next flower, some of the pollen brushes off and pollinates the plant. So the bee is doing this for themselves. They're trying to get pollen to take it to the hive, but they're doing work for all the plants around them too. And because we benefit from the plants, the bees are working for us as well. Other insects, as well as birds and bats, pollinate flowers too, but bees are the most important pollinators. Without bees, many plants would not be able to produce seeds. So butterflies are another set of pollinators. They're very good, and I might send some pictures of butterflies too. Making honey. Bees use nectar to make honey, which they store in their hive until it's time to eat. Either they eat it or we eat it, and they usually have enough honey that we can take some, and it doesn't hurt the hive because they make more than enough so people can eat honey and they can have their own honey too. A lot of work goes into making honey, so it's important for all the bees to work together. It takes about 10 million trips out from the nest to make enough honey to fill one jar. 10 million trips out from the nest to make enough honey to fill one jar. So if you ever get honey, and sometimes it's a little kind of a bear container, a plastic bear container, think of that. There were 10 million trips from the hive to make that little jar of honey. Lots of other animals, including people, like to eat honey, and they collect it from bees' nests. When people who keep bees do this, they always make sure they leave enough honey for the bees to eat. So you can see there's some there for the bees, there's some on the table, jars of honey, each of those 10 million trips from the hive. A new nest. Sometimes a bee colony gets too big. When this happens, the queen may leave the nest with all the older workers and drones in a big group called a swarm. Workers called scouts look for a place to make a new nest. When they have found one, their queen and the other bees join them. In the old nest, a new queen hatches. She mates with drones from other hives and starts to lay eggs to build up the colony again. So these things called swarms, one of the places they show up a lot is in people's driveways because they like something warm, and sometimes they'll find a car that has just been turned off. They'll get on the hood of the car, and somebody will come out to get in their car, and they'll see thousands and thousands of bees. If you ever have that happen, you can find a beekeeper and you call them and you say, I have a swarm in my yard, and the beekeeper's very happy because they'll come out and get those bees, they know how to collect them and help them start a new hive. So there are people that help these swarms create new homes. Beekeeping. We need bees to pollinate our plants, and we love the honey they make, but bees don't need humans. Wild bees can build their own nests. We can, though, provide bees with a cozy hive home, and in return take some of their honey. During the summer months, bees make honey, more honey than they need. When looking in the hive, a beekeeper must wear protective clothing and be very careful. Bees are not dangerous, but they will defend the hive. Just like the ones when I dug up their home, the ones that live in the ground, they defend that. A beekeeper's job is to look after the bees and watch for any signs of disease while disturbing the hive as little as possible. So this is their home, and the beekeeper's not in there a lot, but the beekeeper is trying to help them stay healthy and, like it says, share the honey with the bees. So always leaving plenty behind for the bees, and then the rest goes to us humans. Save the bees. Honeybees are in trouble. There's much less grassland and far fewer wildflower meadows than ever before, so it's harder for bees to gather the nectar and pollen they need. Bees are also harmed by the chemicals that farmers spray on their fields to kill other bugs. You and your family can help by planting flowers in your garden and leaving wild spaces, or by planting seeds in areas of wasteland to make bee-friendly spaces. Buy local honey to support the beekeepers in your area, and tell people how important bees are to all of us. Bees matter, and the more people speak up for them, the more likely it is they will be protected. And then there's a page that you'll probably get a picture of where it says find out more, and it's where you can do some research about bees and find out things about them online or some other books. And then a little bit with a glossary, and the glossary is where they have some of the words that we went over defined. So bees are important, and you can tell your parents about that. You can tell your parents how important they are, other children how important they are. And it doesn't take much to help bees. Just planting a few flowers in your yard can help them. And if you plant a few more flowers, it helps them even more. So hopefully you learned about bees a little bit, and now you like them a little bit better too. So do what you can to support the bees, and thank you very much for listening. And here's some more pictures of my yard and the bees. Thank you. Bye-bye.